Hello, this is Dr. Garrett Castleberry, Program Director for Communication Media and Ethics. And this video coincides with our Communication 2143 course, section title Digital Media Literacy. And this is the first in a series of video lectures where any lecture material is sparked in response to your discussion questions, the student discussion questions that you read and generate each week from the readings, I guess I should say. And so we will try to create a bit of a dialogue, an asynchronous dialogue, so that we can come up with a lot of hopefully helpful feedback for you all in response to the readings. This week we are pulling from questions relating to writing well in the 21st century, written by Linda Spencer, as well as Marcel Danisi's Popular Culture Introductory Perspectives. Okay, and so a little bit warm in here, so we've already lost the jacket, right? So if the tie comes off as well, you know what's happening. It must mean your questions are good, right? That they're sort of generating some heat, and that's what we want. That's what we want out of this kind of activity. So I'm going to work through some, and there's not enough time to get to all of your questions, and so what I have to do is really piecemeal together the ones that I feel like invite the strongest kind of response to us here. But I look forward to this. I'm excited by the commentary you all have created here. And so I'll do my best to answer as many of them as possible, or perhaps leave them open-ended, as that type of rhetorical question gives us that food for thought to process in the future. Anyway, let me jump right in and get started. First up, I have Mindy Brandon's questions for week one. So very excited to get into these. One of her questions asks, how do I avoid over punctuating? Well, in terms of over punctuating, one of the things we can do is avoid run-ons. Run-on sentences are extremely common. They're common. They're typical of first draft efforts, and so what we can do is work on keeping our messages concise and crisp, and if that means breaking an idea into 2 or 3 sentences rather than one continuous one, we are all the better for it. And a rule of thumb: if you are unsure about when to use something in terms of grammar, don't use it. Okay, don't use it. So when in doubt, avoid, right? Go with what you do know. If you can't find an answer to that, either in the style book or by perhaps a strategic search online. All right, so that was a style question, and there are a few of those I will get to this week. But switching gears, and there will be a lot of gear switching here, to the popular culture text. Why is a popular culture more appealing to some rather than to others? Is it generational, cultural, both, or more than that? And so I think we get the idea of what Brandy is asking or getting us to think about here, and is, why do some of us find popular culture so stimulating, so immersive, and I think the more we describe what popular culture is to us, this is self-generating in terms of responses of what is it? Well, what is it is what does it provide for you? What kind of value do you get out of it, or does a person or persons get out of popular culture? And that's part of that overarching message that Denise is going to unpack through time, through theories, through methods, through concepts, through popular texts or media artifacts, as we will call them. And so, not just, and I'm going to use Brandy's words here, generational or cultural, and I do think these are factors, but also we could suggest popular culture could depend on region, right? So it could be a regional response. It could come down to preferential taste. right? As well as political. There have been debates and discussions about whether or not popular culture is or should be political in nature. And I think the proper response is, if we learn how to look at a text or artifact effectively underneath the surface, if not right there on the surface, we can locate the political in most messages. Okay, so excellent question there. That kind of gets us creates a through line, because many of you asked about popular culture. I think that's a classic first question that someone would throw out there. What is popular culture? And that's that's why we have a book-length project to work through together, because there's a lot of unpacking involved. And that's fun, right? That's meant to be a fun process, not unlike popular culture itself. Yes? So, one more question from Brandy. How does one decide whether pop art and popular culture is in the high or low category? And many of you commented on that distinction that Denise makes between high and low culture. And that is definitely a part of the origin and the history of how we get to popular culture, is understanding cultural histories with relation to what is classified in distinctive levels or categories. That's important, and it's not an easy question to answer. But the initial response I would provide is that these high and low distinctions in popular culture, these designations have been intentionally blurred in the last 50 years, if not even further back in American history in particular, right, where we tend to most closely associate and identify popular culture. And so, something else I could comment on is that youth often drive movements, popularity waves, right? And so young people kind of carry those messages and they practice them into existence. Think about the kinds of stores in malls that maybe cater to younger demographics, because they have what we call the consumer power. And so not only that, but opinion leaders and marketers also know how to persuade and influence young people. So there is that history of chicken and egg between, youth people can drive an idea, a concept, a product, a book, or whatever. But there's typically some savvy marketer or opinion leader behind that movement, as well as the author of any given text that itself creates sustainable popular culture, right? And so something we can think about even across decades. Take the 20th century in America as a primary example. This idea of smoking as a social norm. Smoking was extremely popular in the much earlier than this, but really resonated in the 1930s, 40s, 50s, and while it continues to today, those peak decades of use had a lot to do with advertising and how the social norm, if you will, of smoking was projected, kind of continued due to its portrayals in popular culture, right? And so there were some tie-ins there, something like MTV, right, for you Gen Xers. MTV, when it was birthed in the dawn of cable television, and had a way of influencing and creating popular culture to a degree that young people took its ideas and really spread them out. And while that cable channel itself has lost a lot of cultural momentum, right, what we call cultural cachet, that no doubt in its infancy, it was a highly influential piece of popular culture. Video games, follow a similar trend, right? As well as things like now we're social media, right? Drives much of popular culture, as we will get into and talk about later on. But let me transition a little bit, move on to some other questions from other folks in our class, so that we're on a bit of a tight schedule today. I have a class coming up I have to teach, so we want to get to as many of your questions as possible. Megan Deanan asks a couple of questions, just prying beneath the surface, trying to get some answers. That's what we like. Robust questions deserve robust responses. So anyway, with regard, let me back up to the writing well text once again. Megan asks, let's see, how can we find our voice in our writing? So this is coming right out of page 6 in writing well, and the Spencer is encouraging writers to find their voice, and we hear that it's almost a cliche slogan, and what does that mean, and how do we do it, right? I think one of the most important things, and this is why we build me build exercises of this sort into these courses, is repetition in writing or through writing, right? That intentionally ongoing process of writing helps us locate a voice, our voice, many voices. These are all potentialities for us. But even when we don't want to, writing is important, is good for us. And it can take on so many forms. That's why we have, diverse types of exercises that are going to encourage you to find your voice. And so also, in addition to writing, the big two, right? Writing and reading, just like we say, reading and writing. Reading across numerous styles. It can help us find our voice as well. I would encourage you to seek out and locate authors that you enjoy reading. So writers who have a voice that you identify with, this is essential to helping you get passionate about your own writing, and that in turn can help strengthen your voice. And there's another question about voice and style coming up a little bit later, and so I'm going to put a pin in it, and we'll tackle that momentarily. Megan also asks, do you think it will become acceptable to use an emoji in business or technical writing? This is classic do I, don't I question, and we're borderline getting into ethics here, and I think one, as like communication scholars, or those that we study communication, we're studying media. This is our wheelhouse. We need to learn to be aware of possible changes in culture. So, in other words, it's possible, and even perhaps likely. But that doesn't mean we should try to be that person right now. In other words, as opposed to trying to say no or limit you, what I would suggest is don't try to be the person that starts that emoji trend at your job, because right now it's simply not in vogue in the way we communicate with, casual acquaintances, our friends, our family, and there's reasons for that too, right? The more boundaries we blur, the trickier our communication becomes, right? It gets complicated, and so we do want to look out for that. I would avoid emojis. There is that mention about how sometimes throw a smiley face in there, and I understand what that is, to use that in certain inserts. It's disalarming, right? It breaks tension where miscommunication could occur, and I think emojis are starting to play a really important role. And so that's why we had a video on it for week 1. There's some interesting stuff going on there, but the great suggestion would be let the larger culture take the lead in when and where we start to insert those kinds of things in business communication, because corporate organizations will be the last to adopt these. And so we need to be able to be savvy code switchers and be able to communicate across multiple fronts, not the other way around, where we're so important we dictate the rules of how culture works, right? I mean, that's just a practical principle. I will be right back with part 2 of our discussion lecture series for week 1.